You are standing in a medieval city. The sun has set, and now a deep, inky blackness descends, swallowing the narrow streets and timbered houses. There is no electric light here, only the occasional flickering torch or a distant candle glow. The sounds of the day have died away, replaced by the rustle of rats, the creaking of old wood, and a pervasive silence that hums with hidden dangers. Fear often stalked these unlit lanes after dusk. But you are not alone. In the shadows, a figure moves, a sentinel against the night. You rarely hear them, seldom see them, yet they were the guardians who kept chaos at bay. These were the forgotten night watchers, the unsung heroes of medieval darkness. Join us as we step back into the long-lost night. You find yourself immersed in that long-lost night, standing on uneven cobblestones that disappear into the profound gloom. The last sliver of twilight has faded, not gradually as it often does today, but with a swift, almost aggressive descent into absolute darkness. Imagine the sensory shift. The vibrant, bustling energy of the market square, the shouts of vendors, the clatter of artisans, the distant ringing of hammers, all now silenced. A thick blanket of quiet falls over the city, punctuated only by the mournful hoot of an owl from a nearby roof or the distant baying of a dog. You stretch out your hand, and it vanishes before your eyes, swallowed by the void. This is not the familiar dimness of a modern suburban street at night. This is an all-encompassing, oppressive blackness, the kind that disorients and makes every shadow seem to writhe with unseen menace. There are no streetlights here, no distant glow from a highway, not even the faint luminescence of a moon on cloudy nights can penetrate this depth. Any light you might encounter is a precious, fleeting thing. A guttering tallow candle behind a shuttered window, perhaps the fiery breath of a blacksmith's forge if it still labors late, or the faint, dancing flame of a watchman's lantern approaching in the far distance. Feel the cool air settle, carrying with it the damp earthiness from the unpaved lanes and the lingering smells of the day. Refuse, wood smoke, sweat, the faint tang of animal waste, all now muted and diffused. The air grows heavy, thick with the unseen. Your eyes strain, desperately trying to discern shapes in the inky black, but they are met only by an impenetrable wall. This is a world where sight, your most dominant sense in daylight, is suddenly rendered almost useless. You must rely on your ears, on your nose, on the feel of the ground beneath your worn shoes. As darkness takes hold, the city transforms from a hive of human activity into a collection of isolated, vulnerable cells. The great wooden gates of the city walls, which stood open all day, are now slowly, ponderously closed and barred. Their heavy thud echoes through the quiet streets, a definitive sound marking the end of the day and the beginning of the city's slumber. A curfew often followed, a stern decree that all respectable citizens should be safely behind locked doors. To be caught outside after the bells rang could mean trouble, suspicion, or worse. You imagine the feeling of being inside one of these timber-framed houses. A fire burns low in the hearth, casting flickering light and warmth. A single rushlight or a precious beeswax candle might illuminate a small circle, pushing back the encroaching shadows just a few feet. Beyond that tiny halo of domestic light, the house itself would be a realm of deep, unseen corners. Every creak of the old timbers, every rustle of wind through the eaves, every distant, unexplained sound from the street outside would be amplified, transformed into a potential threat. Sleep would be a lighter thing, more easily disturbed, more attuned to the sounds of the night. Think of the real dangers that lurked in this profound darkness. Crime was certainly a major concern. Without any form of reliable street lighting, footpads and cut purses found perfect cover. A lone traveler, even one hurrying home, became an easy target. But it was not just human predators. Wild dogs, hungry and desperate, scavenged through the waste. Even more terrifying was the constant, ever-present threat of fire. A misplaced candle, a spark from a hearth, a dropped torch could quickly ignite dry thatch roofs and timber walls. In narrow, packed streets, A single blaze could consume an entire ward of the city before help could arrive. The speed and ferocity of medieval fires were legendary, leaving ruin and despair in their wake. Beyond the tangible threats, there were the fears born of superstition and ignorance. The darkness was a realm for spirits, for succubi and incubi, for hags and witches, for things that whispered from the shadows and preyed on the innocent. These fears, though perhaps irrational by modern standards, were deeply ingrained and profoundly real to the people of the time. The unseen world pressed in, and the line between the natural and the supernatural blurred when the sun abandoned the sky. So, as you stand in this overwhelming darkness, you begin to understand the desperate need for someone to push back against the tide of night. The city could not simply cease to exist from dusk till dawn. Order had to be maintained. Property had to be protected. The very fabric of urban life, though largely dormant, still required a vigilant eye. It was into this deep, challenging void that the figures of the night watch stepped. They were the thin line between a city that merely slept and a city that descended into chaos. Their patrols were not just about catching criminals. They were about being a visible, however faint, presence against the forces of dissolution. They carried not just weapons, but also the heavy burden of responsibility for an entire community's peace of mind. Their calls, their lanterns, their measured footsteps on the cobblestones were the only regular sounds of human activity that challenged the night's absolute dominion. They walked where you would fear to tread, peered into corners you would avoid, and listened intently for sounds you would dread. They were often ill-equipped, perhaps a simple polearm or a cudgel, a horn to sound alarm, and that ever-important lantern, its weak glow doing little more than illuminating the next few treacherous steps. There were no elaborate communication networks, no backup patrol just a radio call away. Each watchman or small group of watchmen was largely on their own, confronting whatever the night decided to throw at them. The city, though silent, was not truly abandoned to the shadows. It was carefully, painstakingly guarded. Every night, as the last glimmers of daylight vanished, a select group of men took up their posts, bracing themselves for the long, arduous hours ahead. Their duties were varied, their tools simple, but their purpose was singular: to ensure that when the sun finally rose again, the city would awaken largely undisturbed, ready to resume its daily rhythm. They were the silent sentinels, the protectors of the sleeping, and their vigilance was the unseen foundation upon which medieval urban life rested. Without them, the city would have been a different place entirely once night fell. Commerce would have been utterly impossible. Public safety non-existent. The collective slumber of thousands rested on the tired shoulders of a few dozen. Imagine the immense trust placed in these individuals, often drawn from the very community they protected, enduring the cold, the isolation, and the ever-present danger for little reward beyond a meager wage and the unspoken gratitude of a sleeping populace. Their task was monotonous yet critical, lonely yet vital. They battled not just the occasional thief or rowdy drunkard, but the pervasive anxiety that the night itself embodied. They were the human answer to the overwhelming threat of medieval night, a conscious, organized effort to bring a sliver of order and security to the deepest hours of darkness. You realize that the peace you might feel in your own bed at night, even in the absence of obvious threats, is a modern luxury built upon centuries of such vigilant protection. The medieval citizen had no such comfort without these men. They were the bulwark, the first line of defense, the unseen eyes and ears that allowed the rest of the city to truly sleep. Their existence highlights a profound difference between our world and theirs. The night itself was an active antagonist, a force to be resisted and overcome, not merely a period of rest. It was a time when the very structure of society, so robust in daylight, became fragile and susceptible, requiring dedicated, brave souls to mend its seams until dawn. So, who were these figures, these unsung protectors who stood between the slumbering city and the terrors of the medieval night? They were not the romanticized knights of legend, nor the cloaked assassins of dark tales. No, the night watchers were, for the most part, ordinary men, yet burdened with an extraordinary task. Imagine yourself stepping back into their world, into their heavy boots. You might first notice their sheer ordinariness, their faces etched with the fatigue of a life lived by the moon and stars. They were often men drawn from the lower echelons of society, laborers, artisans, or tradesmen, men for whom the meager pay and civic duty were intertwined. Yet, to categorize them simply as lower class would be to miss the complex tapestry of medieval society. In some cities, particularly in their nascent stages, the watch was a communal responsibility, a form of conscription where every able-bodied male citizen was expected to take his turn. Picture yourself, perhaps a baker or a weaver, putting aside your tools for a week or a month, trading your apron for a lantern and a staff, and becoming a temporary guardian of the peace. It was a civic obligation, a tax of time and courage paid to the community. As cities grew, as wealth accumulated, and as the dangers of the night became more sophisticated, the watch evolved. Gradually, these roles became more formalized, less about communal obligation and more about professional necessity. You would begin to see paid positions emerge, men hired specifically for their strength, their reliability, or perhaps even their fearsome reputation. These were often seasoned veterans, men who had seen their share of street brawls and desperate characters. Their experience was invaluable, their knowledge of the city's hidden alleys and darkened corners encyclopedic. What did they look like? Forget elaborate uniforms. Their attire would be practical, durable, and warm, built for long hours exposed to the elements. Thick woolens, sturdy leather, perhaps a simple cloak to ward off the biting wind. A distinguishing mark might be a simple armband or a badge, identifying them as members of the watch, granting them a sliver of authority in the dark. But their most recognizable attributes were not what they wore, but what they carried. In your mind's eye, see the glint of metal and the warm glow of a lamp. Each watchman, or more often a pair of watchmen, would carry a lantern. Not the brilliant electric lights we know today, but an oil lantern, its flame flickering behind horn or thin glass, casting dancing shadows that stretched and shrank with every step. This wasn't just illumination, it was a beacon, a symbol of their presence, cutting through the oppressive gloom. Alongside the lantern, a sturdy wooden staff was an indispensable tool. It was a walking stick, a means of probing dark corners, and, when necessary, a formidable defensive or offensive weapon. Some might also carry a dagger or a short sword, particularly in larger, more dangerous urban centers where true brigands posed a genuine threat. But perhaps the most defining sounds of the night watch, beyond their heavy footsteps on the cobblestones, were their vocalizations. They were the city's living clock, calling out the hours in rhythmic, often melancholic tones. All's well and the hour is 9, or midnight and a clear sky. These cries served multiple purposes. They reassured the sleeping citizens that the watch was active and vigilant. They marked the passage of time. And crucially, they were a means of communication between different watchmen, letting their comrades know where they were and that they were safe. Imagine yourself trying to sleep, these distant echoing calls a lullaby against the vast silence of the night, a subtle reminder that order still held sway. Their duties extended far beyond merely walking the streets. These guardians of the gloom were multitaskers, protectors on many fronts. Their primary directive was, of course, to keep the peace. This meant apprehending thieves, breaking up late-night brawls, and ensuring that no one was out on the streets after curfew without a legitimate reason. Curfew, a word derived from the Old French couvre-feu meaning cover fire, was not just about limiting movement, it was a vital measure against the ever-present danger of fire. And fire was perhaps the greatest terror of the medieval city. Packed tightly with wooden buildings, thatched roofs and open flames from hearths and workshops, a single spark could rapidly engulf an entire neighborhood, if not the whole city. So, one of the watch's most critical duties was fire prevention. They would patrol diligently, looking for unattended fires, ensuring that shopkeepers and homeowners had properly extinguished their embers before bed. If they spotted smoke or flames, their cries would instantly change from the rhythmic calls of the hour to urgent shouts of alarm, summoning the entire community to fight the blaze. They were the first responders the fire brigade rolled into one. You would see them checking the city gates, ensuring they were properly barred and secured against external threats. They would inspect the locks on critical buildings, warehouses, and the homes of merchants. Strangers entering or leaving the city after dark would be questioned, their purpose scrutinized. They were eyes and ears, constantly observing, listening for any sound out of place. A suspicious whisper, the scrape of a ladder against a wall, the distant cry of distress. Imagine the loneliness of their patrol. The wind whips through narrow alleys, carrying the scent of damp earth and stale refuse. Every shadow seems to hold a potential threat. The silence can be profound, broken only by your own footsteps, the rustle of a rat, or the distant howl of a dog. This was a job that required not just physical courage, but immense mental fortitude. The hours were long, the work often thankless, and the pay, if they were paid at all, was rarely generous. Public perception could be mixed. While appreciated for their vital role, they were also sometimes seen as a nuisance, enforcing unpopular curfews or interfering with revelry. Yet, despite these challenges, the night watchers were an indispensable part of urban life. They were the threads that held the social fabric together after sundown. They represented the organized will of the community to assert control over the chaos of the night. Their shifts would typically begin around dusk, often announced by the ringing of a church bell, and would last until dawn, when they would hand over their duties to the day watch, or simply return to their beds, or their other daytime occupations, to rest before the next long, dark vigil. Their presence created a profound sense of security for those within the city walls, a feeling that, while the world outside might be wild and dangerous, within the bounds of their patrol, a measure of safety was maintained. They were not an omnipotent force, capable of preventing every crime or extinguishing every fire, but they were a constant, visible reminder that someone was watching, someone was protecting. They were the guardians of the gloom, living out a forgotten history, one solitary step at a time, protecting the fragile sleep of a medieval city. As the last lingering echo of the city's curfew bell fades into the vast darkness, you find yourself stepping into the role of a night watchman, your senses heightened, your breath visible in the chill air. The city, so vibrant and bustling by day, now lies wrapped in a profound silence, broken only by the distant barking of a dog, the rustling of rats in the refuse, or the mournful cry of an owl. This is your domain from dusk until dawn, a realm of shadows and unseen threats. You carry a heavy staff, a versatile tool for both support and defense, its wood smooth from countless patrols. In your other hand, a lantern, its flickering flame casting a small dancing circle of light that pushes back against the encroaching gloom, revealing cobblestones slick with recent rain, or perhaps the discarded remains of a market day. The light is a beacon but also a target, a declaration of your presence in a world that prefers to hide. Your route is a familiar one, yet each night presents its own unique tapestry of sounds, smells, and anxieties. You begin at the city gates, ensuring they are securely barred, the heavy timbers locked tight against any external threat. The massive wooden doors feel cold beneath your touch, a formidable barrier between civilization and the untamed wilderness beyond. You listen intently for any unusual sounds from outside the walls, the distant howl of a wolf, perhaps, or the more sinister whisper of human voices. From the gates, you proceed into the winding arteries of the city. You walk past the tightly shuttered homes of merchants, their windows dark and uninviting. You pass the inns, where the last raucous laughter might still spill out into the street, a warm yellow glow betraying the revelry within. It is your duty to observe, to listen, and sometimes to intervene. A drunken brawl, a heated argument, or the quiet, clandestine movements of a thief, all fall under your vigilant eye. The air is thick with the smells of the medieval night, the faint aroma of wood smoke from dying hearths, the pungent tang of unwashed streets, the sweet, decaying scent of refuse, and occasionally the comforting smell of freshly baked bread from an all-night bakery. These smells are guides, helping you to understand the city even when your eyes are strained by the darkness. As you navigate the narrow alleys, your footsteps are the only sound, rhythmic and solitary. You call out the hours, your voice a deep, resonant cry that slices through the stillness. All's well and the hour is 9, you might shout, or past midnight and all is safe. This cry is more than just an announcement of time. It is a declaration of presence, a reassurance to those sleeping within their homes, and a warning to those who might wish to do ill. The sound echoes back to you, a lonely affirmation of your vigil. The perils you face are many. The treacherous cobblestones themselves are a constant hazard, especially in the rain or ice. A twisted ankle in the dark could leave you vulnerable, isolated, and in pain. But far greater dangers lurk in the deeper shadows. You are always alert for the glint of a knife, the sudden rush of an assailant, or the desperate plea for help. Footpads, cut purses, and more violent criminals prefer the cover of night, and it is you who stands between them and their unsuspecting victims. You might encounter stray dogs, their barks echoing eerily in the deserted streets, or even larger, more feral creatures drawn by the city's waste. Sometimes you stumble upon a sick or injured person, perhaps a traveler fallen ill, or a beggar who has succumbed to the cold. Your duty then extends to providing what aid you can, or summoning others if the situation demands it. You are, in many ways, the first responder of the medieval night. The threat of fire is ever-present and catastrophic in a city built largely of wood and thatch. You scan the rooftops for any suspicious glow, any tendril of smoke that might signal the start of a devastating blaze. If you spot one, your horn will sound, a piercing, urgent blast that mobilizes the entire community, stirring them from their sleep to form bucket brigades and dismantle adjacent structures to create fire breaks. It is a terrifying responsibility, the fate of hundreds of homes resting on your keen observation. Sometimes your patrol is punctuated by moments of profound tranquility. You might pause by the market square, the stalls empty and silent, bathed in the pale light of the moon. The familiar chaos of the day has receded, leaving behind a stark beauty, a quiet dignity. You gaze up at the stars, countless and brilliant in the unpolluted night sky, a vast canvas stretching endlessly above the sleeping city. In these moments, the weight of your responsibility feels both immense and deeply fulfilling. You may cross paths with other watchmen, a brief exchange of nods and a few hushed words, a shared understanding of the silent burden you both carry. There is a camaraderie in this solitude, a bond forged in the shared experience of vigilance. You are not alone in the night even if you feel it. Other lanterns flicker in the distance, other voices call out the hours, a network of watchful eyes protecting the community. As the night deepens, the cold often intensifies, seeping into your bones despite your thick woolen cloak. You keep moving, knowing that stillness invites the chill. The hours crawl by, each one a testament to your endurance and dedication. You learn to read the subtle signs of the city, the shifting shadows, the distant creak of a closing door, the rhythmic breathing of a nearby stable full of horses. Every detail is a potential clue, every sound a possible alert. You peer down deserted side streets, your lantern light cutting through the absolute darkness, revealing nothing but silent walls and the occasional stack of firewood. It is in these hidden corners that illicit activities are most likely to take place, away from the main thoroughfares. You are trained to spot the unusual, the misplaced, the out-of-place item or shadow that suggests human mischief. The challenges are not just physical. The mental strain of constant alertness, of knowing that danger could emerge from any shadow, is significant. You fight against the urge to succumb to weariness, against the mind playing tricks in the dark, imagining shapes and sounds where there are none. You must remain clear-headed, sharp, and ready to act at a moment's notice. Yet, despite the ever-present potential for peril, the prevailing feeling of many a watchman's night is one of quiet, solitary perseverance. Most nights are uneventful, a series of repetitive rounds, the only drama being the passing of the hours and the slow creep towards dawn. This monotony is, in its own way, a success. It means the peace you strive to maintain has held. You continue your circuit, checking the security of shops, pushing on doors, ensuring no window has been tampered with. The scent of rain might be carried on the wind, promising a damp and miserable end to your shift. Or perhaps a clear sky, revealing the first faint blush of pre-dawn light on the eastern horizon. Your ears pick up the distinct sound of someone moving stealthily down a lane. Your hand instinctively tightens on your staff. You challenge the figure, your voice firm, demanding their identity and purpose. A nervous merchant, perhaps heading out early for market, or a young couple meeting in secret. Or, occasionally, someone with ill intent, who quickly melts back into the shadows rather than face your scrutiny. You learn to distinguish between the truly dangerous and the merely mischievous or desperate. The city breathes around you, a giant organism in slumber. You are its sentry, its breathing, walking consciousness during its most vulnerable hours. Your presence reassures not only the sleeping citizens but also the very structure of the city itself. You are upholding the order, reinforcing the boundaries, and maintaining the social contract that allows people to live in relative safety. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, but is in fact only a handful of hours, a subtle change occurs in the quality of the light. The stars begin to fade, the deepest indigo of the sky softens to a lighter shade, and a faint, ethereal glow appears on the horizon. The first birds begin to chirp, tentative at first, then growing bolder. The city begins its slow, gradual awakening. You have made your final rounds, the cold air now feeling crisp rather than chilling. The first hint of dawn washes over the rooftops, painting them in muted grays and purples. You might see a solitary baker stoking his oven, or a farmer arriving at the city gates with his produce. The day watchman or the general populace will soon take over and your vigil will be complete. The transition from night to day is a quiet, profound moment for you. You have stood guard while the world slept, facing its hidden dangers, and now you deliver it back, largely unscathed, into the light. The sense of responsibility slowly lifts, replaced by a quiet satisfaction. Your shift is ending, but the cycle will begin anew when darkness falls once more. You have ensured another night of relative peace for the medieval city, a silent, unseen hero walking the forgotten paths of history. As you fade from the street, disappearing into your temporary rest, leaving the city to the nascent day, it is worth reflecting on the physical extensions of your will, the humble implements that allowed you to master the darkness. These were not just objects. They were your eyes, your voice, and your protector in a world defined by shadows. Without them, your patrol would be a blind stumble, a silent prayer for safety rather than an active vigil. Consider first the lantern, your most constant companion, a small beacon against the overwhelming blackness. Imagine its weight in your hand, the faint warmth radiating from its metal frame, the subtle scent of oil or tallow that clung to your clothing. This was not a powerful searchlight. Medieval illumination was a precious, fragile thing. Your lantern would have held a beeswax candle, perhaps an oil lamp with a wick, enclosed in horn panes or thin sheets of oiled parchment to protect the flame from the wind. Glass was too expensive, too easily shattered for the rough streets you patrolled. The light it cast was modest, a flickering halo that extended only a few paces ahead. It transformed the familiar world into a landscape of dancing shadows and exaggerated forms. Every barrel became a potential hiding place, every alley entrance a cavern of the unknown. The lantern forced you to move slowly, to scrutinize each pool of darkness, to listen more intently to the sounds just beyond its reach. It was enough to illuminate the cobbles at your feet, to reveal a discarded bucket or a sleeping dog, but it left much to the imagination, much to your sharpened senses. This feeble light was also a sign a moving star in the otherwise unlit city. It announced your presence both to those who sought your protection and to those who wished to evade you. A common thief might see it and melt away, choosing an easier target. A lost traveler might spot it and feel a surge of relief. It was a visual marker of order, a tiny island of human vigilance in an ocean of darkness. You relied on it not just to see but to signify. It was a silent promise that someone was watching, that the city was not entirely abandoned to the night. Then there was your staff, a stout length of seasoned wood taller than yourself, perhaps 6 or 7 feet long. This was a multi-purpose tool, essential for your solitary rounds. Feel its smooth, worn surface under your grip, the heft of it as you lean it against a wall. Its primary function was defense. In a sudden confrontation, it could be a formidable weapon, used to parry a blow to keep an attacker at bay, or to deliver a crushing strike if necessary. You were not a knight, perhaps, but you were armed, and your staff was a deterrent, a sign that you were not to be trifled with. Beyond its use in a fight, the staff was an invaluable aid to navigation and inspection. Imagine probing the dark corners of a building, testing a creaking gate, or pushing aside a hanging cloth that might conceal a doorway. It allowed you to extend your reach, to investigate without placing your hand directly into unknown dangers. It was a third leg on uneven terrain, helping you maintain balance on slippery cobbles or negotiate the unseen steps of a darkened alley. Its rhythmic tap on the ground as you walked would have become part of the night's soundtrack, a reassuring counterpoint to the city's whispers. The staff also served as a symbol of your authority. Even without a uniform, its presence marked you as someone with a specific role, a purpose in the night. It was an unmistakable emblem of your duty, recognized by citizens and criminals alike. To see the silhouette of a watchman, lantern glowing, staff held firm, was to understand that the law had a presence even in the dead of night. It was your rod of office, a physical representation of the trust placed in you by the community. Finally, consider the horn, a simple yet powerful instrument. It hung at your belt, perhaps a cow horn hollowed and polished, or a more ornate brass or copper one for a wealthier city's watch. Its purpose was communication, a way to cut through the silence or the din of the night and be heard across distances. Imagine bringing it to your lips, the slightly metallic or organic taste of the mouthpiece, and then, with a deep breath, sounding a call. A blast from your horn could mean many things. It could be an alarm, a piercing shriek that summoned other watchmen to a disturbance, signaling fire, theft, or violence. The urgency of its tone would instantly alert anyone within earshot that something was amiss. It was the medieval equivalent of a panic button, immediate and undeniable. Your neighbors, stirred from their sleep, would know by the quality of the blast whether to bar their doors more tightly or to peer cautiously from their windows. But the horn was not just for emergencies. It was also a timekeeper marking the passing hours. In many cities, watchmen would sound their horns at regular intervals throughout the night, often every hour or every half hour. This served several functions. It assured the sleeping populace that the watch was vigilant and active. It helped to maintain a schedule for your fellow watchmen, ensuring that patrols were coordinated and that no one fell asleep on duty. And it also, in a pre-clock era, provided the citizens with a sonic measure of the night, letting them know how long until dawn, how much more time they had to sleep. Picture yourself, pausing at a crossroads, lifting the horn to your mouth. The sound you emit, a long, clear note, echoes between the timbered houses, bounces off the stone walls of the cathedral, and dissipates into the vast, open sky above. It is a lonely sound, but also a comforting one for those inside their homes. It is a declaration, all is well and I am here. Or conversely, it is a rallying cry, danger is near, awaken and be warned. These three tools, the lantern, the staff, and the horn, were more than just equipment. They were extensions of your very being during your nightly duties. They shaped your movements, directed your gaze, amplified your voice, and protected your person. They connected you to the city, making you both a part of its silent rhythm and its vigilant guardian. Each scratch on the staff, each drip of oil from the lantern, each resonant note from the horn carried the weight of countless nights, countless footsteps, countless moments of quiet observation and sudden action. They represented the human effort to bring order to chaos, to push back against the primal fear of the dark. You did not just carry these items, you embodied their purpose. The faint light of the lantern guided you. The solid wood of the staff supported and defended you. The clear note of the horn announced your presence and purpose. These were the simple yet profound instruments of your twilight trade, the forgotten tools that helped secure the medieval night, one watchful step, one dim glow, one resounding call at a time. And as you put them down, as your shift ends and the sun rises, you feel the familiar fatigue, but also the quiet pride of a task well done, secured by these humble, indispensable companions. You have relied on them and they have served you well. Yet, as the last echoes of your horn fade, and the worn staff rests against the stone, a different kind of vigilance begins to prickle at your senses. The quiet hum of the sleeping city, so recently a comfort, now holds a latent tension. You know that beyond the lurking shadows of thieves and the whispered secrets of the night, a far more primal enemy stirs, one that can consume a city faster than any army and leave only ash in its wake: fire. This is not a threat that waits for an ambush in an alley. It is a slow, insidious creep or a sudden, explosive burst. You breathe in the night air not just for its coolness, but for any hint of smoke, any unusual acridity that might cling to the wind. You scan the rooftops not just for movement, but for a telltale shimmer against the velvet blackness, a glow that does not belong to the moon or the distant stars. Medieval cities are tinderboxes. Imagine yourself standing on a street, narrow and winding, lined with buildings crafted almost entirely from wood. Timber frames rise 3, 4, even 5 stories high, each floor overhanging the one below, creating a shadowy canopy. Roofs are often thatched with straw, dry as kindling, or covered in wooden shingles baked brittle by the sun. Homes are packed cheek by jowl, separated by mere feet, sometimes even touching. Below, in the ground floors, workshops hum with dangerous energy. Blacksmiths forge metal with roaring fires. Bakers stoke their ovens for the morning's bread. Candlemakers melt wax over open flames. Even in homes, the hearth is the heart of existence, a controlled fire that can, with a single errant spark, become a destroyer. You understand this inherent fragility. Every step you take on your rounds is a patrol against this invisible beast. You linger a little longer near the baker's shop, noting the faint smell of residual heat, listening for any suspicious crackle. You cast your lantern's beam over the smithy's chimney, searching for an unusual plume of smoke, a rogue ember caught in the night air. The constant, gnawing fear of fire is a heavy companion on your watch, a weight you carry alongside your lantern and staff. One night it might be different. The air shifts. You might catch a scent, subtle at first, not the comforting aroma of wood smoke from a well-tended hearth, but something sharper, more acrid, a burning that is out of place. Your senses sharpen, your heart begins to quicken its rhythm. You turn your head, scanning the familiar skyline, looking for the source. Perhaps it begins as a faint orange flicker, a tiny point of light dancing where no light should be, high on a rooftop, or peeking from a narrow window in a distant quarter. Or perhaps it is a thicker plume of smoke, not drifting lazily upwards, but boiling into the night sky, dark against the lighter clouds, or illuminated ominously from beneath. The moment of discovery is a jolt, a sudden transition from watchful calm to urgent action. There is no time for hesitation. You raise your horn to your lips, not for a routine call, but for the piercing, insistent blast that screams alarm. One long, sustained note, then another, cutting through the silence of the night, designed to rouse the sleeping city from its slumber. This is the sound of immediate danger, a cry that every citizen, from the Lord Mayor to the lowliest beggar, instantly understands. As your horn echoes through the winding streets, You begin to run, your heavy boots pounding the cobblestones. You direct your lantern's beam towards the rising smoke, the burgeoning glow. You shout, your voice hoarse, "Fire! Fire in the high street! Fire!" or "Flames in the tanner's row." You must be precise, guiding the waking populace, even as you race towards the blaze yourself. Others begin to stir. Windows bang open. Distant shouts answer yours. Soon, the church bells begin to toll, not with their usual steady rhythm, but in a rapid, frantic peal, a relentless clang clang clang, joining the cacophony of your horn and your shouts. This is the city's ultimate distress signal, heard for miles around, pulling every able-bodied person from their beds. You reach the scene. The fire, which moments ago was a distant flicker, now roars, a living, hungry entity. Flames lick at dry timbers, greedily consuming thatch, sending showers of sparks high into the night. The heat hits you like a physical blow, an inferno radiating outwards. Smoke stings your eyes and catches in your throat, thick and acrid. Chaos erupts, but it is a chaos with a desperate purpose. Neighbors spill out of their homes, some still in their nightclothes carrying buckets. Children are clutched close by terrified parents. You see the organized panic begin. A bucket chain forms, stretching from the nearest well or cistern, a continuous line of hands passing water towards the inferno. Men grab axes, hooks, and poles. Your role now shifts from simple detection to direct leadership and organization. You are no longer just a patrolman, you are a first responder, a coordinator. You shout instructions, guiding people, pointing to critical areas. Break down that door, you might command, or get to the roof with that water. You know the city's architecture, its weak points, its flammable arteries. You understand how fire spreads, racing along connecting walls, leaping across narrow alleys, propelled by the night wind. The goal is not just to douse the flames, which often feels like an impossible task against such a raging beast, but to contain it. This means making brutal decisions. Tear it down, you might hear or even shout yourself, pointing to a neighboring house, its timbers still untouched but directly in the fire's path. Sometimes houses must be deliberately pulled down, creating a gap, a firebreak, sacrificing one structure to save many more. The sounds of breaking wood, splintering beams, and falling masonry add to the terrible chorus of the fire. Amidst the roaring inferno and the frantic efforts, you are also watching for other dangers. Looters, ever opportunistic, might try to sneak into abandoned homes or even into the chaos of the burning buildings. You must keep an eye on the terrified crowds, preventing stampedes or accidental injuries. You might even join in the desperate efforts to rescue people trapped within the burning structures. Your sturdy staff used to bash open a jammed door or prop up a collapsing beam. The battle against the fire can last for hours, through the darkest part of the night and into the first gray light of dawn. Your muscles ache, your lungs burn, your face is streaked with soot and sweat. The heat is relentless, the noise deafening, a sensory overload that pushes you to your limits. You push through the exhaustion, driven by the knowledge that every moment, every bucket of water, every broken wall makes a difference. Slowly, agonizingly, the inferno might begin to recede. The towering flames shrink to glowing embers, the roar diminishes to a hiss and crackle. The sky, once lit by the furious orange glow, gradually lightens with the promise of a new day. But the scene that emerges is one of utter devastation. Blackened husks of buildings stand starkly against the rising sun. The air is thick with the smell of char, wet ash, and smoke. Where homes once stood, now there is only rubble, smoldering ruins, and the lingering heat of destruction. You walk through the devastation, your face grim. The silence, after the hours of chaos, is almost more profound, punctuated only by the mournful drips of water and the creak of cooling timbers. You see the faces of the homeless, the ruined, those who have lost everything. There is a deep ache within you, a mixture of exhaustion and sorrow, but also, if the fire was contained, a quiet sense of accomplishment. You did your duty. You raised the alarm. You helped to fight. You limited the destruction. Even when the fire consumes an entire block, when it feels like a defeat, your presence and your actions were vital. Without you, without the early warning, the outcome could have been far worse, perhaps the loss of the entire city. Your vigilance, your timely alarm, your leadership in the face of panic, these are the unseen efforts that measure success, even in the shadow of widespread destruction. And as the city slowly begins the arduous task of sifting through the ashes, of rebuilding, you know that the threat remains. Every night, as you take up your lantern and staff once more, as you step out into the quiet, dark streets, the ghost of fire walks with you. It is a constant reminder of the fragile peace you guard, the ever-present danger that lurks in every flickering candle, every glowing hearth, every unattended spark. Your watch against the human threats is significant, but your vigil against the elemental fury of fire is perhaps the most critical duty of all. You are the city's first line of defense, its eyes and ears against the insatiable hunger of the flame, a forgotten hero of countless untold battles against the most destructive force known to the medieval world. Every breath you take, every shadow you pierce with your lantern, is a testament to this tireless, unending watch. The safety of the city rests upon your shoulders, a burden made heavier by the knowledge that fire is always waiting, always threatening to consume. You continue your rounds, knowing that with each step, you are pushing back against the encroaching devastation, hoping that tonight the night will pass quietly, without the terrible clang of the alarm bells. You are the guardian against the flickering flames. The last flicker of internal fire is now secured, the immediate threat of widespread conflagration pushed back for another hour. Your boots, accustomed to the cobblestones of the crowded market, now find themselves on a different path, a path less traveled by the city's ordinary folk after dark. You turn your gaze from the clustered rooftops and their sleeping inhabitants, shifting your attention outward, toward the massive, silent presence of the city walls. They stand as a testament to human ingenuity and communal will, a barrier of stone and earth that defines the boundary between civilization and the wild, between the known and the often terrifying unknown. You ascend the winding steps to the ramparts, feeling the cold, smooth stone beneath your fingers, a stark contrast to the rough timber and plaster of the city's houses. The wind, which was merely a whisper between buildings, now bites with an untamed vigor up here, carrying with it the sense of damp earth, distant forests, and perhaps something else, something less identifiable. The very air feels different, thinner, imbued with a sense of vastness that was absent in the enclosed streets below. Up here, high above the sleeping city, the view is expansive and humbling. You see the grid of moonlit streets, the faint glow of distant hearths, a spiderweb of lives contained within this protective shell. But your attention is drawn outward, over the formidable battlements, into the profound darkness that stretches beyond the ditch, beyond the fields, to the shadowy edges of the world. This is where the unseen foe truly dwells. Your duties here are different, less about immediate intervention and more about observation, deterrence, and early warning. You patrol the wall walk, your lantern casting a small, bobbing pool of light that seems swallowed by the immensity of the night. You check the merlons and crenellations, ensuring no one has tampered with the stone, no grappling hooks lie waiting. You lean over the edge, peering down into the dry moat or the water-filled ditch, searching for any sign of disturbance, any footprint in the mud, any shadow that seems too deep, too still. The city gates, those massive portals of timber and iron, are a particular focus. They are the arteries of the city during the day, but at night, they become its most vulnerable points. You inspect the bars, the chains, the heavy bolts, running your hand over the cold metal, listening for any creak or groan that shouldn't be there. You check the posterns, the smaller, often hidden gates used for specific purposes, ensuring their locks are secure and undisturbed. Any hint of a breach, any sign of an attempt to gain unauthorized entry, must be reported immediately. The integrity of these entryways is paramount to the city's survival. It is out here that you truly confront the immediate, tangible threats from beyond the city's embrace. Bandits, for example, are a constant menace. Driven by desperation or greed, they lurk in the shadowed woodlands, waiting for an opportunity. Perhaps they attempt to scale a less guarded section of the wall, or try to bribe a gatekeeper, or even attempt a crude breach. Your presence, your periodic passing, is a deterrent, a visible reminder that the city is vigilant, even in its deepest slumber. You listen for the telltale snap of a twig, the rustle of leaves that isn't the wind, the faint murmur of human voices where there should be only silence. You are the sentinel against the human predators who prey on the vulnerability of the night. Sometimes, it is not direct assault but subtle infiltration. Smugglers attempting to bypass tariffs or bring in contraband goods might try to use the darkness as a cloak. They might have hidden pathways, or attempt to pass goods over lower sections of the wall. Your keen eyes scan for anything out of place. A rope dangling where it shouldn't be, a sack left near the base of the wall, the glint of a tool in the moonlight. These acts, while not violent, undermine the city's economy and order, and are a silent threat in their own right. But beyond these more conventional dangers, there is another category of unseen foe, one far more insidious, far more terrifying in its reach. This enemy does not carry a sword or wield a torch. It has no physical form you can fight, no walls you can build high enough to keep it out. This is the unseen enemy of pestilence, of disease, of the Black Death itself. Medieval cities, for all their strength in stone and numbers, were often fragile ecosystems, vulnerable to the silent invasion of illness. The movement of people and goods, essential for life, also served as vectors for death. Your role as a night watchman, while not that of a physician or a priest, becomes unexpectedly critical in the defense against such an unseen foe. You are at the gates. You observe the comings and goings not just for suspicious characters, but for suspicious signs of illness. A traveler arriving late, coughing uncontrollably, with a feverish pallor and eyes that betray suffering. A family attempting to leave under the cloak of darkness, their faces drawn with fear, perhaps hiding a sick child. While you cannot diagnose, you can report. Your observations are vital intelligence for the city authorities, for the physicians, for the aldermen who must make grim decisions. During times of plague, your duties take on an even more somber aspect. You might be tasked with enforcing quarantines, patrolling areas where the sick are isolated, ensuring no one enters or leaves, thereby preventing the further spread of the invisible killer. This is a duty filled with dread, for you stand guard not against visible aggression, but against a microscopic terror that can claim anyone, including yourself. You see the fear in the eyes of those confined, the desperate pleas of those seeking escape, the grim determination of the healthy attempting to protect themselves. You might be the one to report unusual spikes in deaths within a district, noticing a sudden silence in a street where children usually play, a number of closed doors and drawn shutters that speak of loss. These are not direct confrontations, but rather acts of silent vigilance, of piecing together fragments of information that can lead to vital action, potentially saving countless lives. Your lantern light piercings the literal darkness, but your observations try to pierce the deeper, more terrifying darkness of an epidemic. The psychological toll of this particular unseen foe is immense. You patrol, knowing that the very air you breathe, the touch of a stranger, could be a conduit for this invisible enemy. There is no armor against it, no sword that can strike it down. Your only weapon is awareness, diligence, and the courage to face the pervasive, creeping fear. Beyond human and biological threats, there are the more subtle, existential, unseen foes of the medieval night. The relentless forces of nature that can subtly weaken the city's defenses. Prolonged rain can erode foundations, flood cellars, weaken the earthworks around the walls. Frost can crack stone. The insidious growth of roots can compromise mortar. While not immediate threats, your rounds include an awareness of these natural processes, reporting any significant structural changes or water damage that could, over time, create a vulnerability. You are a pair of eyes for the city against the slow, grinding forces of decay. And then there is the unseen foe within the mind, the isolation of the lonely watch, the superstitions that cling to the shadows outside the city. Whispers of spirits, of monstrous beasts in the surrounding wilderness, of dark magic practiced under the full moon. While a practical man, a night watchman is also a man of his time. The unknown itself can be an unseen foe, preying on fear and imagination, especially when one stands alone, suspended between the safety of the city and the vastness of the untamed night. Your watch beyond the walls is a lonely vigil, a comprehensive defense against the spectrum of threats. From the bandit waiting in ambush to the silent, invisible march of disease, from the forces of nature to the terrors of the imagination, you are the unwavering guardian. You are the link between the city's vulnerability and its resilience. Each careful step along the ramparts, each moment spent peering into the darkness, is an affirmation of your commitment to the collective safety. You stand not just as a protector against physical harm, but as an integral part of the city's immune system, constantly monitoring, constantly reporting, constantly defending against what cannot always be seen but can always harm. Your silence is a shield, your awareness a weapon against the myriad dangers that lurk just beyond the protective embrace of the city walls. But what of the man beneath the hooded cloak, the one who embodies this unwavering awareness? What life awaits you, the solitary sentinel, once the sun has dipped below the horizon and the city's heart begins its slumbering beat? Your shift is about to begin, not on the grand ramparts you have just patrolled, but deep within the labyrinthine alleys, among the timbered houses and the shadowed doorways where other, more intimate dangers lurk. You are not a knight in shining armor, nor a wealthy merchant. You are a man of the people, from the poorer quarters, perhaps a former soldier, a laborer whose aging body can no longer bear the heavy burdens of the day, or simply someone desperate enough to take on the night. Your pay is meager, a pittance for the peril you face. Imagine this: a single penny, perhaps two, for an entire night's work. A single copper coin, cold and worn, resting heavy in your calloused palm. What does that penny buy you in this medieval world? A loaf of coarse bread, perhaps a measure of watered-down ale. Enough to stave off the gnawing hunger for a few hours, but little else. It is a wage that barely keeps your own family from the brink of destitution, a constant reminder of your precarious existence. You take the coin not for comfort but for survival, knowing the true cost of your service is far greater than its monetary value. As twilight deepens, you make your way to the watch house, or perhaps simply a designated corner near the market square, where a brief moment of camaraderie might be shared with a handful of other men before you disperse. The air grows colder, carrying the damp scent of refuse and hearth smoke, mixed with the faint sweetness of fermenting grains from a nearby brewery. Your uniform, if you even have one, is simple, practical. A sturdy woolen tunic, a heavy cloak to ward off the biting wind and hide your form in shadow, and a leather cap pulled low over your ears. No gleaming armor for you, just layers of cloth against the elements and the occasional blade. Your tools are basic: a heavy wooden staff, sometimes tipped with iron, both a support and a deterrent, a walking stick and a weapon. A lantern, its horn panes flickering with the uncertain glow of a tallow candle, casting dancing shadows ahead of you, revealing only slivers of the path. And perhaps a horn, a cow horn or a ram's horn, its reedy blast a shrill call to arms, a warning, or simply a signal to your fellow watchers scattered across the city, their own solitary patrols mirroring yours. The weight of the night settles upon your shoulders. You have just spent your day in other labors, perhaps mending nets by the river, chopping wood for the Lord's manor, or hauling goods for a local merchant. Sleep, for you, is a luxury, something snatched in fragmented hours between shifts, rarely a deep, restorative plunge into oblivion. As others seek the warmth of their beds, the soft comfort of their mattresses, you are just beginning your long, arduous trek, your senses already strained from a day of toil. You step out into the deepening gloom. The streets, bustling with life by day, are now hushed, save for the skittering of unseen creatures, the distant barking of a dog or the low murmur of wind through eaves. Every shadow holds a potential threat, every darkened doorway a possible ambush. You are walking a tightrope between the familiar and the utterly unknown. Your senses must be razor sharp. You listen for the telltale creak of a shutter that isn't quite closed, the muffled clang of metal that suggests a lock being tampered with, the hushed whisper that doesn't belong. Your eyes scan every doorway, every alleyway, every pile of refuse that could conceal a lurking figure, every open window that might offer a glimpse of illicit activity within. The dangers are manifold and relentless. There are the professional thieves, their faces masked or hooded, their intentions clear, silently scaling walls or picking locks with practiced hands. They move like wraiths, their goal the unguarded vault, the sleeping merchant's chest. There are drunken revelers spilling out of taverns, their mood unpredictable, their fists quick to fly, turning a simple disagreement into a violent brawl that could consume an entire street corner. There are desperate vagrants seeking warmth or food, sometimes driven by hunger or cold to petty crime, their desperation a different kind of threat. And then there are the fires. Oh, the fires. In a city built predominantly of wood and thatch, where hearths burn constantly and candles flicker in every home, a single carelessly dropped ember, a forgotten candle, or a faulty chimney can turn an entire district into a raging inferno within minutes. You are the first line of defense, the one who must raise the alarm with your horn's piercing cry, direct the frantic bucket brigades, and rouse the sleeping populace from their deadly slumber, often risking your own life to bang on doors swallowed by smoke. Your rounds are prescribed, but the night is full of surprises. You might find a lost child, shivering and tearful, separated from their parents during the evening market. You might stumble upon a brawling couple, their domestic dispute spilling violently into the street, requiring you to mediate or separate them. You might encounter a group of rowdy apprentices, defying curfew, ready for mischief, their boisterous laughter echoing unervingly in the quiet night. Each situation demands a different approach. A firm hand, a gentle word, a quick intervention, a sharp warning. You are part peacekeeper, part social worker, part fireman, part detective, all rolled into one weary, solitary figure. The physical toll is immense. Hours upon hours on your feet, trudging through mud, over uneven cobblestones, up and down narrow, winding lanes. Your legs ache, your back protests, but you cannot stop. The cold seeps into your bones, an insidious chill that no amount of woolen cloak seems to repel. The dampness chills you to the core. In winter, your breath freezes in the air, a visible cloud accompanying each weary sigh. Your fingers grow numb around your staff, making it a clumsy extension of your arm. In summer, the heavy cloak becomes a burden, yet you dare not shed it, for it offers a modicum of protection against both the chill of the later hours and the potential dangers you face. Your body aches with a chronic exhaustion, your eyes burn with fatigue, but you cannot falter. A moment of inattention, a lapse in vigilance, a missed cry for help, could spell disaster for a household, a street, or even the entire city. And the loneliness. It is a palpable presence, walking beside you like an invisible, unyielding companion. The vast majority of the city sleeps, oblivious to your tireless vigil, dreaming their dreams, secure in their closed homes. You are a ghost among the living, a silent protector moving through a world lost in slumber. The only sounds are often your own footsteps, the rhythmic swing of your lantern, the distant cries of a nocturnal animal, and the occasional chime of a distant church bell marking the passing hours. 1 o'clock. 2 o'clock. 3 o'clock. Each strike echoes the relentless march of time and the dwindling hours until dawn, until release, until the brief respite of sleep. There is little gratitude for your efforts. Many see you as an unwelcome authority, an inconvenience, a meddler. Merchants might grumble about the noise you make or the questions you ask, preferring not to be disturbed. Young lovers might resent your interruption of their clandestine meetings. You are a necessary evil, tolerated rather than celebrated, a shadow figure who, by their very presence, reminds others of the darkness they wish to ignore. Should a crime occur on your watch, you are often the first to be blamed, facing the wrath of the town council, fines that strip away your meager earnings or even imprisonment. Your reputation, your livelihood, your very freedom hangs precariously on your ability to prevent the unforeseen. You learn to read the night, to understand its subtle language, a language spoken in whispers and shadows. The way the wind whispers around certain corners, carrying different scents. Stale beer, burning timber, something metallic. The distinct sound of a distant dog versus a nearby one, its bark carrying different implications. The different quality of footsteps on various surfaces. The soft pad on dirt, the sharp click on stone, the dull thud on a wooden walkway. You develop an intuitive sense for trouble, a sixth sense honed by countless hours of solitary patrol. You know which taverns are likely to spill out trouble, which dark alleys are favored by lurking shadows, which houses are known for unrest. You become intimately familiar with the city's underbelly, its secret passages, its hidden dangers, its clandestine activities. The constant stress gnaws at you. The fear of missing something, of failing in your duty, of confronting an overwhelming force of criminals or a raging inferno with only your staff and your courage. You carry the burden of the city's safety on your weary shoulders, a responsibility that far outweighs the paltry sum in your pocket. Yet you persevere. You continue to call out the hour, your voice hoarse from the cold and fatigue, but steady, a beacon in the darkness. You continue to shine your lantern into the gloom, pushing back the encroaching darkness, one flickering beam at a time. This is your life, the forgotten hero of the medieval night. A life of quiet sacrifice, of unwavering dedication in the face of indifference and danger. You are the unseen hand that guides the city safely through the darkness, allowing its citizens to sleep soundly, unaware of the battles you fight on their behalf, the cold you endure, the dangers you avert. Your reward is not glory, but simply the unbroken silence of a peaceful dawn, the knowledge that another night has passed without catastrophe, and the hope of a few hours of sleep before the relentless cycle begins anew. You are the humble custodian of the sleeping world, and your story, often unwritten, is etched into the very stones of the city you protect, a silent testament to endurance and duty. You are a silent testament, yes, but to whom? The city sleeps, its citizens secure within their timbered homes, their stone walls. For them, your endurance, your duty remains largely unseen, largely unacknowledged. You walk a path that often plunges you into the very bottom rung of society's ladder. Your story, etched into the stones, is often overlooked by those who walk above ground in the light of day. Consider your status. Who are you, the night watchman, in the grand tapestry of the medieval town? You are not the respected merchant, the skilled artisan, nor the devout cleric. You are a figure often drawn from the margins. Perhaps you are an old soldier, past your prime, scarred by conflicts long concluded, seeking a meager wage to survive. Perhaps you are a man fallen on hard times, a journeyman who could not find steady work, a widow's son needing to support his family. Or perhaps you are simply one of the many whose fortunes never quite rose above the shadows. This is not a position sought by the ambitious or the privileged. This is a post for those for whom other doors have closed, or for whom the lure of a regular, if paltry, income outweighs the dread of the night's embrace. You wear the simple uniform, a coarse tunic, perhaps, a cape against the chill. Your tools are humble, the lantern, the staff, the horn, the bell. These are not symbols of power or prestige, but rather the practical necessities of a challenging, often thankless role. As you patrol, calling out the hours, you know that your presence is a dual-edged sword for the sleeping populace. On one hand, you are their protection. On the other, you are a constant reminder of the threats that necessitate such protection. And in the complex social hierarchy of the medieval world, reminders of danger, especially when embodied by a figure of low standing, often invite not gratitude, but a subtle, sometimes overt, scorn. Imagine the wealthy merchant, roused from a deep sleep by your booming cry of, "All is well and the hour is 9." Does he feel a surge of gratitude? Perhaps a fleeting thought of security. But more often you are a disturbance. A necessary nuisance. A common figure whose very presence signifies a world he would rather forget during his comfortable slumber. You hear the whispers, the snickers from those few late-night revelers who still stumble through the streets. There goes old Thomas or young William talking to himself again. They mock your solemnity, your routine, your very dedication. You are a figure of jest in the taverns, the butt of jokes about your sleepy eyes, your gruff voice, your imagined cowardice in the face of true danger. The children too, when they see you by daylight, might point and giggle. You are the man of the night, the one who carries the strange lantern, who walks alone when everyone else is in their beds. You are an outsider, even in the heart of your own community. You are set apart by the nature of your calling. Even officialdom, the very authorities you serve, often hold you in a certain disdain. You are a tool, a functionary easily replaced. Your reports of petty crimes, of suspicious figures, might be dismissed with a wave of a hand, or met with skepticism. They expect you to deter crime, but also seem to doubt your ability to do so, or your honesty in reporting it. You are held responsible for the city's peace, yet given little power or respect to truly enforce it. This scorn, this low status, is part of your silent sacrifice. It is not just the cold that gnaws at your bones, or the fear that tightens its grip when a shadow stirs in an alley. It is the steady erosion of your dignity, the knowledge that your vital service is often unappreciated, even ridiculed. You give your nights, your sleep, your energy, and in return, you receive a pittance and the quiet sneers of those you protect. Your sacrifice is multifaceted. It is the physical toll, undoubtedly. The relentless cycle of vigilance, the constant battle against fatigue, the damp chill that permeates your cloak and seeps into your very bones. You develop a cough that lingers through the seasons, your joints ache with a persistent dull throb. Your eyes, accustomed to the gloom, find the midday sun almost painfully bright. But more profound is the sacrifice of a normal life. While others feast and celebrate, you stand guard. While families gather around hearths, you walk alone through the deserted streets. Your social life, if you have one, is constrained to the brief hours of daylight, often spent trying to recover from the previous night's duty. You miss the market bustle, the church festivals, the simple camaraderie of neighbors sharing a drink at the alehouse during the evening hours. You are separated from the rhythms of the community. You become a creature of the night, an almost spectral figure, glimpsed by few, truly known by even fewer. This isolation can be a heavy burden. The human spirit thrives on connection, on belonging. Your role, by its very nature, pushes you to the fringes. Consider the mental strain. Every creak of a shutter, every rustle of leaves, every distant dog bark, could be a prelude to danger. Your mind is a finely tuned instrument of detection, constantly scanning, assessing, anticipating. This constant state of heightened awareness is exhausting, far more so than mere physical exertion. It saps your mental energy, leaving you weary even after you finally find your bed. The line between necessary vigilance and paranoia can blur in the deep hours of the night. And what of your family? If you have a wife, children, they too bear the weight of your calling. They see you depart each evening into the encroaching darkness, unsure of what the night will bring. They wake to find you sleeping or preparing to sleep while their day begins. The meals you share are often silent, your mind still replaying the echoes of the night, or already bracing for the next. Your absence is a constant presence in their lives, a quiet testament to your unwavering dedication, but also to the demanding nature of your sacrifice. You choose this, perhaps not willingly at first, but you embrace it. You accept the scorn, the low status, the loneliness because you understand something that the sleeping city does not: the fragility of peace. You know that without your watchful eye, without your unwavering call, without your staff to deter the mischief maker or your horn to raise the alarm, the fragile peace of the night could shatter. So you carry your lantern, a small star in the vast darkness. You call out the hours, your voice a rhythmic anchor in the stillness. You endure the cold, the taunts, the indifference. You do it not for glory, for there is none, and not for riches, for there are few. You do it because someone must. Someone must stand between the sleeping world and the encroaching chaos. Your silent sacrifice is an act of profound civic duty, one largely unrecorded in the grand chronicles of history. Historians write of kings and battles, of trade routes and grand cathedrals. They rarely pause to consider the humble watchman, who made all those other achievements possible by simply keeping the peace, one quiet, lonely night at a time. You are the invisible glue that holds the community together after sunset. You are the quiet guardian whose vigilance allows others the luxury of oblivion. You are the unsung hero, not of a single heroic act, but of 1,000 tiny acts of courage, patience, and unwavering commitment, repeated endlessly night after night, season after season. And as the first faint hint of dawn begins to paint the eastern sky, washing the stars away, you feel a familiar mixture of exhaustion and quiet triumph. Another night has passed. The city is safe. You have performed your duty. You prepare to return to your meager lodgings, to seek a few hours of uneasy sleep, knowing that as the sun rises, your work, your sacrifice, will once again recede into the shadows, waiting for the moon to call you forth anew. The heavy bell in the town tower, which marks your hours, also symbolizes your place. Below the bell, below the notice, yet essential, an unseen pivot around which the city's life silently turns. You are the steadfast keeper of the dark, the unacknowledged cornerstone of a peaceful night. The unseen pivot around which the city's life silently turns, the steadfast keeper of the dark, is not merely a guardian against tangible threats. Your role, though often unacknowledged, reaches deeper into the psychological fabric of the medieval night. For in those hours of profound darkness, when the city sleeps, the real and the imagined often blur, and the air itself seems to thicken with whispers of tales and superstitions. You walk your rounds, your lantern casting a small dancing pool of light that pushes back the immediate gloom, but cannot dispel the pervasive sense of the unknown that clings to every shadow. You know the city intimately, every cobble, every timbered house, every narrow alleyway. But the city you patrol by day is a different beast entirely from the one that emerges after sunset. By day, it is a place of commerce, community, and human endeavor. By night, it transforms into a realm where ancient fears and vivid superstitions hold sway. Consider the ordinary folk you protect. Their lives are often hard, short, and filled with uncertainty. They live close to the land, their existence dictated by the seasons, the whims of nature, and the unpredictable turns of fate. In such a world, where disease can strike without warning and bad harvests can mean starvation, it is only natural for people to seek explanations, to attribute events to forces beyond their control. And what greater canvas for these forces than the night itself? As you pass by houses, you might hear the faint sounds of families stirring, or perhaps the muffled prayers of someone seeking protection from the night's unseen dangers. You know that behind those stout wooden doors, candles burn low, warding off not just the physical darkness but also the spiritual one. Tales of ghosts, witches, and malevolent spirits are not mere campfire stories for these people. They are very real possibilities, threats as tangible as a cut purse or a fire. Imagine the chill that runs down your spine when you hear a sudden, unidentifiable cry from a darkened alley. Is it a stray cat, a drunkard, or something else? Your mind, trained to observe, to be vigilant, cannot help but consider the more unsettling possibilities that the common folk speak of. You have heard the stories around the alehouse fires, the hushed warnings passed from elder to child. The restless dead, unable to find peace, are said to wander the very streets you patrol. Unbaptized infants, buried in unconsecrated ground, might cry out from the darkness. Witches too are a pervasive fear. Secret covens meeting under the moon, casting spells, causing illness, or bringing misfortune. You might pass a house known for an old woman who keeps to herself, her windows always shuttered. Is she simply reclusive, or is she practicing dark arts? The fear is palpable, woven into the very fabric of the city's nightly anxieties. While your mandate is to protect against crime and fire, the unspoken expectation, perhaps even from yourself, is also to stand guard against these more arcane threats. You might scoff in the bright light of day, dismiss such talk as mere peasant superstition. But alone in the oppressive quiet of the wee hours, when the wind howls through narrow passages and shadows stretch and distort familiar objects into monstrous shapes, even the most rational mind can waver. A sudden creak of a shutter, a distant, mournful howl, the rustling of leaves that sounds unnervingly like footsteps behind you. Your heart quickens. You grip your staff tighter. Is it truly nothing, or is the night playing tricks on your solitary mind? The watchman, being a solitary figure who navigates the heart of the night, often becomes a repository of these tales. You are the one who sees what others do not. You are the one who hears the strange sounds. People might approach you in the morning, asking if you saw anything unusual, a strange light, an odd figure, a sign of ill omen. They look to you not just for news of fires or arrests, but for confirmation or denial of their deepest, darkest fears. You are, in a way, a living conduit to the supernatural realm, a gatekeeper between the sleeping world and the world of spirits. Sometimes your presence alone is a comfort against these unseen horrors. Your steady rhythmic footsteps, the metallic clang of your staff on the cobblestones, the beam of your lantern, these are not just signs of physical security, but also symbolic barriers against the imagined evils that lurk in the dark. Your earthly presence reassures the fearful that a human protector is out there, keeping vigil, even if they cannot actively fight a specter or banish a witch. And what of your own beliefs? You are a man of your time, raised in a world saturated with faith and fear. You likely carry your own small amulets, say your own quiet prayers as you begin your shift. Perhaps a sprig of blessed herbs in your pouch, a small crucifix tucked inside your tunic, a whispered invocation to saints known to protect against evil. These are not merely for show. They are genuine attempts to safeguard yourself in a world where the line between natural and supernatural is often blurred, especially when you are the sole living soul navigating the quiet, vulnerable heart of the city. The stories you encounter are not always dire. There are also tales of mischievous sprites, of hidden treasures guarded by ancient spirits, or of helpful house fairies. But these are fewer, less potent than the pervasive dread of the malevolent. The night, in the medieval mind, is primarily a time of danger, both human and otherworldly. You are privy to the strange sounds that have no logical explanation. The mournful wail of a banshee, perhaps. Or the clanking chains of a ghostly procession. You know the spots where people claim to have seen apparitions, the old execution sites, the churchyards, the houses where tragedies have occurred. You naturally avoid some of these places or approach them with an extra measure of caution, your senses heightened, your heart beating a little faster. The lore extends to animals as well. The hoot of an owl, often seen as an omen of death. The black cat crossing your path, a bringer of bad luck. The sudden flight of a flock of birds for no apparent reason, interpreted as a sign of unseen forces at play. You observe these things not always with belief, but always with awareness, for the city's inhabitants read meaning into everything. Your job is not just to prevent fires, but also to prevent panic, to be a calm, steady presence in a world often beset by irrational fears. When you do encounter something truly inexplicable, a chilling gust of wind indoors, a door that opens by itself, a strange glowing light in a distant window, you learn to keep it to yourself. To speak of such things openly is to invite either ridicule or accusations of being in league with dark forces yourself. So these encounters become part of your personal, unspoken lore, stored away in the corners of your mind, adding to the silent burden of your nightly watch. You are a witness to the fragility of human reason in the face of the unknown. You see how easily fear can take root, how quickly a shadow can become a monster, how a creak can become a groan. And in your own solitude, you sometimes feel the pull of that fear, the irrational conviction that something is indeed out there, beyond your lantern's reach, beyond the protection of your staff, waiting. The watchmen's tales, when they are eventually told, become part of the city's oral history. They are embellished, exaggerated, transformed with each retelling. You become a figure of mystery yourself, privy to the secrets of the night, a man who walks where others fear to tread, a man who might have seen things that defy explanation. This adds another layer to your already complex role. You are not just a guard, but a storyteller, a living legend in the making, however minor. So, as you continue your rounds, listening to the murmurs of the sleeping city, to the faint sounds carried on the night wind, you are not just hearing the physical city. You are hearing the echoes of its beliefs, its fears, its enduring superstitions. You are hearing the whispers in the walls, the tales spun over generations, the deep-seated anxieties that give the night its true, pervasive character. And you, the solitary watchman, are immersed in all of it, a lone figure moving through a landscape as much defined by the supernatural as by the stone and timber around you. Your presence is a shield, yes, but also a lens through which the city's ghostly anxieties are both observed and perhaps even amplified in the deep, silent hours. The weight of these unspoken fears, the psychological burden of being the only waking soul in a city steeped in such lore, adds another layer to your exhaustion. It is not just the physical toll of endless walking, or the constant vigilance against real threats. It is also the mental fortitude required to confront the specters of the mind, the demons of popular belief, that truly defines your unique, lonely vigil. You are the custodian of the city's secrets, both real and imagined, the silent keeper of its waking peace and its slumbering nightmares. Your lantern cuts through the physical gloom, but the deeper shadows, those cast by fear and superstition, are eternal. They lurk just beyond the edge of your light, a constant, silent presence, accompanying you on every step of your solitary journey through the medieval night. You are the bridge between the tangible and the unknown, the guardian who patrols not only the streets but also the permeable boundary between the two worlds. You patrol your familiar streets, the rhythm of your steps a comfort against the pervasive silence. Your breath mists in the cold air, your lantern a small sun against the vast, star-dusted canopy. You are the guardian of this particular city, at this particular moment in time. But what if you were to look beyond these stone walls, beyond this specific set of cobblestones and timbered houses? What if you were to journey across the continent, through the varied landscapes of medieval Europe? Would your duties remain the same? Would your burden be equally defined by shadows and superstitions? The answer you would quickly discover is a resounding no. While the fundamental purpose of the night watchman was universal, to keep the peace and protect the sleeping city, the specific tasks, the methods, and even the dangers you faced could change dramatically from one domain to another. The medieval world was a patchwork of distinct cultures, economies, and governing structures, and your role as a silent sentry of the night adapted to each. Imagine yourself now in the bustling Hanseatic League cities of Northern Europe, like Lübeck or Hamburg. Here, the wealth of the city is not just in its people, but in the vast warehouses teeming with valuable trade goods: salted fish, furs, timber, wine, textiles. Your vigil here would take on an even more pronounced economic dimension. You would not only be watching for brigands, but also for those intent on pilfering precious cargo. Your route might snake through crowded dockyards, past the creaking hulls of merchant ships, and along storage buildings whose contents represented the very lifeblood of the city. Fire, always a threat in timber-rich settlements, would be a particularly terrifying specter in these storage districts. One spark, one careless flame, could engulf an entire quarter, destroying fortunes and livelihoods in moments. Your cry of "fire" would trigger a cascade of bells, a desperate scramble to form human chains to pass buckets, a battle against an enemy both relentless and swift. Travel south, across the Alps, and you might find yourself in the vibrant, fiercely independent city-states of Italy: Florence, Siena, Venice. Here, the concept of civic pride and republican ideals often shaped the watch. You might be part of a more formally organized militia, patrolling not just for common criminals but also for political agitators or rival factions. The narrow, twisting alleys of these cities, often overlooked by towering palazzi, could hide assassins as easily as petty thieves. Your equipment might be more martial, your training more rigorous in the use of a spear or a sword. In Venice, your beat might literally be on water, navigating silent canals in a small boat, your lantern reflecting on the dark, lapping surface as you check moorings and bridge crossings. The threat of naval incursions or infiltration via the waterways would add another layer of complexity to your watch. You would be less of a lone guardian and more of a uniformed arm of the state, enforcing not just peace but also loyalty. Across the English Channel, and in the walled towns of medieval England, your duties might swing towards a simpler, yet equally vital rhythm. Here, the watch and ward system often relied on citizens taking turns. While some towns employed paid watchmen, many expected every able-bodied man to contribute to the nocturnal security. This could mean that one night you are a baker, the next you are walking the walls, armed with a simple staff and a horn. Your primary task would be to enforce the strict curfew, ensuring that all fires were doused, all doors locked, and that no unauthorized person roamed the streets after the curfew bell had rung. You would be listening for the telltale sounds of brewing trouble: a drunken brawl spilling out of a tavern, the furtive rustle of a poacher, or the distant barking of dogs signaling an approaching stranger. Your authority, while stemming from communal expectation, would be backed by the fear of local justice. In French towns, especially those under direct royal authority, your duties might include a strong emphasis on maintaining the king's peace. This meant not just preventing crime, but also discouraging any form of rebellion or sedition. The watch here could be more integrated with the local provost or bailiff, acting as their eyes and ears during the hours of darkness. You might be expected to report on suspicious gatherings, or to ensure that no forbidden assemblies were taking place under the cloak of night. Your patrol might frequently involve checking the gates, ensuring they were properly barred and guarded against external threats, a reminder that the city's walls were not just decorative, but vital lines of defense. Consider the role of the night watchman during times of plague, a horrifying reality that swept across Europe multiple times. In these grim periods, your duties would transform from routine policing to a macabre form of public health enforcement. You might be tasked with identifying and isolating infected households, marking their doors with a dreaded red cross. You would patrol for those trying to escape quarantine, or for the grim sight of bodies left in the streets. Your lantern light would cut through the disease-laden air, revealing not just shadows, but the devastating toll of sickness. The silence of the usual night would be replaced by the coughs of the dying, the prayers of the desperate, and the chilling creak of the plague cart. You would be a guardian against contagion, a grim reaper's assistant, enforcing the desperate measures designed to save the city from itself. The enforcement of curfews and sumptuary laws also varied. While a universal expectation, the severity and specifics differed. In some regions, a night watchman might be empowered to fine or even imprison those found on the streets without a legitimate reason. In others, particularly in strict moral or religious communities, you might be tasked with enforcing codes of conduct, listening for illicit gambling or other forbidden activities that thrived under cover of darkness. Your role would extend beyond physical security to moral policing, an omnipresent reminder of societal norms even when the sun was down. Across the continent, the funding and organization of the watch also presented a diverse picture. In wealthier cities, particularly in Italy and the Low Countries, you might be a paid professional, part of a municipal force, equipped and supported by city taxes. Your position, while still demanding, might offer a degree of stability and even respect. But in many smaller towns and rural communities, the night watch remained a civic duty, a communal burden shared by all citizens. You might be an unpaid volunteer, contributing your time as part of your obligation to the community. This often meant your equipment was your own, your training informal, and your authority derived more from custom than from formal decree. The tools of your trade also reflected these regional differences. While a lantern and a staff were ubiquitous, in a heavily fortified German town, you might also carry a handbell to mark the hours and a more formidable weapon for defense. In a busy market town, you might have a key to the watch house where delinquents were held overnight. Your senses, honed by countless hours of darkness, would be your most critical instruments, but the specific sounds you listened for, the specific smells you identified, would be colored by the unique character of each city. The distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer versus the rustle of rats in a granary, the sweet scent of baking bread versus the stench of industrial waste from tanneries or dyeing vats. From the grand, well-lit squares of a Florentine republic to the muddy, unpaved lanes of an English market town, from the cold, stone walls of a German fortress to the bustling quays of a French port, the night watchman remained an essential, if often overlooked, figure. Your duties might shift from guarding against fire to catching spies, from enforcing curfews to policing disease, but your fundamental role as the city's silent protector, its waking conscience in the hours of sleep, endured. You were a ubiquitous presence, a constant against the shifting tapestry of medieval life, your solitary journey echoing across the diverse landscapes of a continent perpetually caught between light and shadow. You have walked the cobbled streets, felt the biting wind, heard the whispers of the sleeping city for centuries. Your solitary journey, a constant thread woven through the fabric of diverse medieval landscapes, speaks to a system deeply ingrained, a method of protection that endured for an astonishing length of time. From the flickering lamplight of the Roman Empire, through the darkest stretches of the Middle Ages, and into the dawn of the Enlightenment, your role as night watchman remained largely unchanged in its fundamental purpose. You were the eyes and ears of the night, the immediate responder, the local guardian. But even the most enduring traditions are eventually swept along by the relentless current of progress and societal evolution. The stability and predictability that allowed the night watch to function effectively for so long began to crack under the strain of a rapidly transforming world. The very cities you protected were growing at an unprecedented pace, their populations swelling with new opportunities, new industries, and new challenges. Imagine the claustrophobic lanes of a burgeoning London or Paris in the 17th and 18th centuries. The simple act of traversing them became a different experience. No longer were they merely conduits for local trade and foot traffic. They were choked with humanity, teeming with merchants, artisans, laborers, and the increasingly desperate poor. This demographic explosion, fueled by early industrialization and agricultural shifts, created a density of life and, inevitably, a density of crime that the old system was never designed to handle. You, as a night watchman, were a familiar face, a part of the community fabric. But that very familiarity, that reliance on local knowledge and goodwill, became a weakness in an anonymous, sprawling metropolis. How could one or two watchmen effectively patrol districts of thousands, or even tens of thousands, of inhabitants? The sheer scale of urban life overwhelmed the localized, part-time, and often amateur nature of the night watch. The types of threats also began to change. While fire and petty theft remained constant concerns, the rise of more organized criminal gangs, the increasing sophistication of property crime, and the growing specter of widespread public disorder demanded a more robust, coordinated, and professional response. Riots, often fueled by economic hardship or political unrest, became more frequent and more violent, far beyond the capacity of a handful of aging or ill-equipped watchmen to control. You might blow your whistle, you might shout for help, but against a surging mob, your individual authority was negligible. Moreover, the night watch system suffered from inherent structural flaws. Recruitment was often haphazard, with watchmen frequently being older men, sometimes infirm, whose primary motivation was often the meager pay or an escape from the workhouse rather than a burning desire for civic duty. Training was minimal to non-existent. You learned on the job if you learned at all. Equipment was rudimentary: a lantern, a rattle, a staff, perhaps a dog. There was little standardization, no central command, and often little accountability. Corruption was a persistent problem, with some watchmen turning a blind eye to illicit activities or even participating in them. The line between guardian and perpetrator could, at times, become disturbingly blurred. The inefficiencies became glaringly obvious. If a serious crime occurred, you could raise the alarm, but the pursuit and apprehension of criminals often fell to citizen efforts or more specialized, but still piecemeal, groups like the thief-takers. These were private individuals who, for a fee or a reward, would track down criminals. While sometimes effective, their methods were often brutal, their motivations purely mercenary, and their reach limited. They were a reaction, not a deterrent. You have felt the lingering presence of the night watchman, a phantom echo beneath the roar of the modern city. You have walked with them through the silent, shadowed streets. You understand their profound importance, their ceaseless contribution to the very fabric of urban safety and peace. Yet, despite their fundamental role, their widespread presence, and their enduring legacy, the night watchmen of medieval and early modern cities have largely faded from our collective memory. They are ghosts in the historical record, seldom celebrated, rarely remembered. How can such a vital, pervasive institution simply vanish from our awareness, leaving barely a ripple in the vast ocean of history? The reasons for this erasure are as complex and interwoven as the very streets the watchmen once patrolled. They involve shifting technologies, evolving social structures, and perhaps the peculiar irony of success itself. Imagine, first, the radical transformation of the urban night. For centuries, the night was a realm of profound, unyielding darkness. Outside the glow of a few scattered torches or domestic hearths, the city plunged into an almost absolute blackness, broken only by the moon and stars, often obscured by cloud cover or the smoke of the city itself. This was the darkness the watchman confronted, a darkness that magnified every sound, every shadow, every fear. His lantern was not merely a light source, it was a beacon, a fragile island of defiance against the unknown. Then came the gaslight. Slowly, city by city, street by street, the gas lamp began to push back the encroaching night. Imagine standing on a corner as a lamplighter made his rounds, touching a long pole to each lamppost, coaxing a soft, steady glow into existence. One by one, the streets began to emerge from the gloom. This was not the brilliant, comprehensive illumination of electricity, but it was a revolutionary change. It reduced the watchman's dependency on his personal lantern. It made the lurking dangers of the shadows slightly less potent. You could see a little further, recognize a face from a greater distance. And then later came electricity. The arc lamp, then the incandescent bulb, cast an entirely new kind of light upon the city. The night, once a dominion of secrecy and hidden threats, began to yield its mysteries to the relentless advance of artificial illumination. With electric streetlights, the urban landscape was transformed from a realm of deep chiaroscuro into something approaching a perpetual twilight. The role of the watchman, once defined by his ability to navigate and challenge the absolute dark, was fundamentally altered. His lantern became quaint, then obsolete. The necessity of his singular, brave light diminished as the city itself became a blaze of controlled brilliance. This technological revolution in lighting was one powerful current pulling the watchman out of the spotlight of public memory. But another, equally profound shift was occurring in the very structure of urban governance and order. For centuries, the night watch was often a communal responsibility. It was a civic duty, sometimes compulsory, sometimes compensated, but often rooted in the local community. You might have been called upon to serve your turn, joining your neighbors in a shared vigil. This system, while sometimes effective, was also inconsistent. Training varied, motivation fluctuated, and the capacity for truly professional law enforcement was limited. As cities grew larger, more complex, and faced new challenges, the informal, localized nature of the watch began to appear increasingly inadequate. The Industrial Revolution brought with it massive population shifts, new forms of crime, and a growing demand for more centralized, efficient forms of social control. This is where the concept of professional policing began to take root. You see the rise of the modern police force in cities like London with its bobbies, or in Paris with its gendarmes. These were organized, uniformed, centrally commanded bodies of men whose sole responsibility was maintaining public order, day and night. They received training, followed standardized procedures, and were accountable to a higher authority. As these professional forces expanded, they gradually absorbed, then superseded the older night watch systems. The watchmen, once autonomous or loosely organized, found themselves either integrated into the new police structures, where their historical identity was subsumed, or simply phased out. Their traditional role, so long a cornerstone of urban security, became redundant. The night patrol was no longer the exclusive domain of a community watch. It was now a 24-hour operation by trained professionals. The individual watchman, with his unique identity and local lore, dissolved into the broader, more anonymous structure of the police department. Consider also the changing social perceptions of crime and justice. In earlier eras, the watchman was a direct, often personal link to justice and protection. He was a familiar figure, a part of the neighborhood fabric. But as societies modernized, there was a growing desire for a more formalized, impartial, and systematic approach to law enforcement. The image of the solitary, often elderly or infirm, watchman with his lantern and rattle began to seem anachronistic, perhaps even a bit comical, in an era that prized efficiency and scientific method. The heroic narratives shifted from the lone vigilante against the dark to the organized, strategic efforts of a modern police force. And then there is perhaps the most insidious reason for the watchman's disappearance from memory, the very success of his mission. Their vigilance was largely preventative. They deterred crime, they quelled nascent disturbances, they provided a sense of security that, over time, became an expectation rather than a privilege. When a city is generally peaceful, when its nights are relatively safe, the efforts required to achieve that state are often forgotten. You take the peace for granted. You do not constantly reflect on the invisible structures and historical efforts that underpin it. The watchman's work was rarely dramatic or heroic in the conventional sense. It was a tireless, repetitive, often mundane act of presence. His greatest triumph was often the uneventful night, the absence of incident, the quiet hum of a city that slept undisturbed. This kind of success, while profoundly important, does not lend itself to grand monuments, epic poems, or celebrated historical narratives. There were no great battles won, no empires forged, simply the quiet, continuous battle against chaos, fought one street corner at a time, one lonely hour after another. His was a story written in the soft glow of a lantern, not in the bold strokes of a conqueror's pen. His legacy was the relative calm of the urban night, a comfort so pervasive that it became invisible. When an institution becomes so integral that its output is simply expected, its origins and the immense effort behind its establishment often recede into the background. The peace they created allowed new forms of progress, new societal structures, and in doing so inadvertently paved the way for their own historical eclipse. You walk through a brightly lit city street today, enjoying a sense of safety that is almost entirely unconscious. You do not spare a thought for the brave souls who first carved out that fragile peace from the terrifying darkness. The quiet, dedicated work of the night watchman, once so essential, so visible, so real, has been subsumed by the very advancements it helped make possible. Their role became obsolete, their memory faded, and their extraordinary contribution was absorbed into the taken-for-granted normalcy of urban safety. They are forgotten not because they failed but perhaps paradoxically because they succeeded so profoundly. They were the silent architects of urban peace, their legacy built so seamlessly into the foundations of modern life that we rarely perceive the hand that laid the stones. The quiet sentinel who once stood alone against the encroaching night, now stands alone in the forgotten corners of history.